Have you ever walked into a room and felt invisible? Today I want to tell you why it happens and why it might not be the loss that you think it is. So if you're a woman over 40, you may know exactly what I'm talking about. And one of the strangest parts of getting older is realizing just how early that the world starts acting, like it can't see you anymore. And, not literally, of course, people still say good morning and, you still hold the door open for a stranger, but culturally and socially, there's this quiet disappearing act. It's a subtle shift where you fade just a little more each year. One wrinkle, one birthday, one gray hair at a time. And it starts to feel like, the world has quietly decided that your value has expired. Your youth is behind you, your childbearing years are behind you, and somehow that makes you less interesting or less relevant and less worthy of attention. So for women who grew up being told directly or indirectly, that our value is tied to being looked at, this can feel like a kind of erasure. We don't just lose visibility, we lose the mirror we were trained to rely on. So let's talk about what's actually happening underneath of this feeling, because once you understand it, then you can move through this stage of life with more clarity and presence and freedom than you ever had in your 20s, and definitely more self-authority. For many of us, the shift feels unsettling because we've spent decades seeing ourselves through other people's eyes, especially through the gaze and the approval of potential partners or people we were attracted to, and the way we walked into a room and the way we stood and smiled and dressed, and all by the same questions. How desirable am I? How youthful? How pleasing? And for generations, women were taught that our value came from our appearance and how well we could attract or please others. And that conditioning has deep roots that go way back. It grew from a culture that measured women by what we provided to others rather than by who we truly were. And if you've lived like that, of course you feel it when the gaze disappears. And it can even feel a little scary. I get it, because the object that you were conditioned to be is suddenly past its usefulness. But when that external gaze fades, something else has room to appear, and that's your own gaze. And the piece that came to me when I stopped performing honestly surprised me. I stopped looking for approval from people who didn't know me, or frankly, that didn't matter. And I stopped scanning a room to see if I registered to anyone. And there's a strange freedom in no longer waiting to be chosen, or validated. And when you stop looking for approval, you suddenly realize how much time and energy that you used to spend chasing it, and here's where the shift happens. So when the gaze of others quiets down, your inner world gets louder, and you start noticing your own authority and your own voice and your own impact. And it's the difference between being an object and being a subject. Objects are looked at. Subjects act, and they initiate, and they author their own lives. And when you step fully into that subject role, when you stop treating yourself like something to be evaluated or just looked at, the invisible woman doesn't disappear at all. She finally emerges, and she becomes dimensional and grounded and powerful. And I remember very clearly the moment that I first noticed the transformation starting to happen. And I was in my early 40s walking through a Costco, just randomly shopping. And I saw a younger woman who was absolutely eye-catching. She was really lovely. And she was turning heads left and right, And if you're nodding along with this, go ahead and subscribe so that you don't miss the next conversation, because these topics are really important and they matter. And I'd love for you to be part of them. So as I kept walking those aisles in Costco, I realized I wasn't turning heads. No one was looking at me. And for the first time, it was completely okay. I wasn't performing anymore, and I wasn't waiting for someone to validate me. And the freedom in that, honestly, it was stunning, you know, because when you stop living in response to the gaze of others, your energy comes back and your creativity comes back and your presence, the real you, starts to emerge. And you stop worrying about who's looking at you and start caring more about what you are looking at and what you're building and what you're enjoying. And here's the twist. Invisibility doesn't always shrink us. Sometimes it expands us, you know, because when you're not performing, then you can actually observe and you notice more and you connect more and you develop empathy and depth and perspective. And you see your place in the world, you know, with more clarity. So no, we're not disappearing. We're evolving and we become independent of other people's perceptions. And going unrecognized can actually help us recognize our place in something bigger, something more meaningful than beauty or desirability or approval, because you're finally being seen by the person who matters the most, yourself. Thanks so much for watching and for being here with me. I'll see you next time.